Hello, everybody, and welcome to Command Point. I'm Shane. I'm just sitting here, and I figured, everybody's talking about Marines. I just did a whole thing on Bieranid's podcast talking about different Marine lists, and the day of reckoning is coming when we're going to start seeing the new Pariah Nexus Marines in tournament play. And the prediction right now among the community, among some of the best in the community, is that they might very well end up dominating. And we're probably going to be, I mean, we already saw a lot of Marines in tournaments before, back when they weren't being played that optimally, and they were a more difficult faction to play. But now that they are going to be both the most popular faction and potentially the strongest faction, if not up there, like one of the strongest factions, it's something that a lot of people are going to have to think about. And for the Space Marine players out there, I thought it would be a fun little exercise because people seem to love tier lists, and it's just something that people get really into. Uh, I figured I would do a Space Marine model tier list where I basically go through the plethora of models that Space Marines get and rank them from S tier all the way down to F tier, just like we do for our faction tier lists for each tournament. So yeah, I mean, let's get right started. Let's get right into it. I've got right here at the very top, we've got the very new Bladeguard veterans who people are terrified of. These guys are 3 wounds, um, strength 4, toughness 4. They've got a storm shield, so the 4-up invuln. They've got the mastercrafted power sword that does I think it's AP 3, 2 damage, strength plus 1, just craziness. Yeah, these guys are super duper strong. So the question is, are they like S tier? Let's make them a little bigger so that way. Yeah, there we go. Is it S tier though? I mean, there is something to be said that they are kind of inflexible. I mean, they get a pistol and they get this melee weapon, and they're pretty expensive. They're like 30 points. They're super good for their value. I think a lot of melee builds you should see these guys, especially against like T4 or something. But because they don't have the highest they can get is strength 5, so they can run into problems potentially. I don't want to put them S tier, but I think they're A tier. I think that they're extremely strong A tier. Um, you can't just take 4 of them and roll, but you should probably take at least one in every like melee heavy list, or at least strongly consider it, right? So yeah, A tier for the Bladeguard veterans. And next up, we have the other new guy, the Assault Intercessors. Everybody thought these guys were going to be like amazing when they came out, and then it started to sink in that the chain swords that they get, those Astartes chain swords with the AP -1, like veterans get them too, and like every Marine model can get them almost. And that was like their whole niche. And yeah, they're Primaris, but now all Marines are 2 wounds, so they aren't actually that good. And the only thing that they have really going for them is they're 1 point cheaper than a veteran. You can't load them out with much. They basically come stocked with the chain sword and a couple of attacks for 1 point cheaper than a veteran, but the veteran can take all this extra stuff, including they can take 2 chain swords. So, I mean, you're going to get the same melee output for 1 point more, well, more melee output for 1 point more, and higher leadership. They aren't terrible, though. I'm going to put them C tier right now, but I feel like they're going to end up being like a low C tier. I mean, we'll see how this sticks, right? Moving on. Rather than doing Sternguard veterans, I know they're in different data sheets now, but rather than doing Sternguard veterans, Company veterans, Vanguard veterans, all in different entries, I just put them all in one entry for one reason, and that's because they are the best model that Astartes get. They should be your bread and butter in every tournament that you play. Your list should be built around the veterans, whether it's a company veteran with like a company veteran, like the veteran sergeant, or a Sternguard sergeant, or a Vanguard sergeant. These models are all really good. So that whole archetype, it's good. It should be your core when you're building Space Marine lists. They can take so much stuff. If you want guys that can pack a ton of attacks in melee, you can load them up with a couple chain swords. If you want a guy with a storm shield and a power fist, you can do that with these guys too. You want an amazing ranged model. There are veteran gunners and there are stern guard gunners that while having super expensive guns that probably aren't that efficient, they are extremely strong. And now that they're 2 wounds, I mean, even with the little upgrade to the points cost, these guys are still your bread and butter. They can take anything basically. They come with leadership 8 at a minimum. Yeah, these guys are awesome. When you're building Space Marine lists, look at the veterans. Especially the veteran sergeants. All the sergeants are like, they should be making appearances in most lists. Next we have Eliminators. So Eliminators actually got a buff with the new stuff. They're one of the only Primaris that did get a buff. They now have Ballistic Skill 2, which is a nice thing because their only weapons they can take are heavy weapons. And they still have that concealed deployment ability, which is kind of cool. But I think after all this time, like with concealed deployment being in the game, we've never seen it be like a game breaker. It's never been a factor in like a major like top 8 Space Marine list that I can think of. Yeah, it's a neat little ability, and you can cheese opponents with it, but it's not what puts Eliminators like over the edge or anything. Their archetype is they're like a long range gunner that can set up in unique areas. And there's some merit to it. That being said, I haven't gotten to the heavy intercessors yet, but when I do, you're going to hear me talk about how heavy intercessors kind of took that archetype and they are cheaper, more durable. They have the option to take much stronger weapons. So because of that, C tier maybe? I think I'd put them below the assault intercessors because the assault intercessors have like a niche where if you just want to save points, you could take them instead of a veteran. Whereas I feel like the Eliminator is always going to be outperformed by something else, and it's not even more efficient, it's actually more expensive. But I mean, I don't think I can put a D tier because, I mean, the weapons they do have are good paired with concealed deployment, so yeah, let's throw them here and see. Next up, we have Incursors. Incursors they're kind of weird, right? They have like their own little... Okay, actually, I'm wrong about the Eliminators being the only one to get a buff. Incursors also did get a buff because they can now also use concealed deployment. They just have their bolt gun, which I believe you add 1 to hit rolls to targets that are obscured. But it's just a bolt gun, so nothing super fancy. And they have those little combat blades with the AP -1. They only get 2 attacks, though. The Sergeant gets 3. I mean, now that they can take concealed deployment, I think there might be a niche for like an Incursor Sergeant who's like a veteran spec who can like set up closer to your enemy's deployment zone and then vet move and then like try and get in their face really quick. So because of that, I think I kind of like them. I mean, in that sense, they offer something that other models don't offer, whereas outside of concealed deployment, Eliminators are just a worse dedicated gunner option for Marines. So I think what I'm going to do here, I think I actually like Incursors more. And I mean, those bolt guns are okay against T3 and stuff. I mean, it does okay. They're not great though. I would put them here. I mean, they have that little combat blade, which is nice. No real versatility. You can't change too much up on them. And I believe they get the Haywire Mines, which are just a massive waste of points. Don't ever take those. Okay, next up, Suppressors. Suppressors are interesting. They are another Primaris. They have, I believe, 12-inch movement. They have fly. They have this really cool gun, the Accelerator Autocannon, I believe it's called, that does... They suppress enemy like gun lines, kind of, which is kind of a cool niche. And I've always thought that Eliminators were a little bit underrated. They might kind of fall into the same thing as the Eliminators, where I was saying they're basically like they're a dedicated gunner, but they're way more expensive than certain models that are just better. That being said, they do offer the amazing movement that other factions or that other Astartes models don't get. So I really like that about them. It's hard to place these guys. I don't think you would ever take more than 1. Most people wouldn't even take 1. And their gun is only AP2, even though it is kind of strong, if I'm not mistaken. And they can't be a heavy spec, so you're flying around with these guys. You're incentivized to zip around with these guys, but you've got a heavy weapon, so you're hitting on 4s. So you kind of have to play them like I've thought about running them Salamanders before, with like, they could be a sniper spec, so you're kind of offsetting the ballistic skill 4 that essentially comes in once you move. But I mean, 12-inch movement is no joke. I kind of like them more than these guys. I think they're a little bit underrated because of the high points costs. People kind of shy away from it. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's a niche for it, for sure. Let's move on. Oh boy, we got Reivers. So Reivers They do the exact same thing as Assault Intercessor Sergeants, or Assault Intercessors, except their weapons don't have AP. They cost a point more. They got nerfed actually because they're the deep strike tactic. They have to take the jump packs now, or the grapnel, whatever those things are called. So basically, what you have is this overpriced, worse version of a model. And whereas with like the Assault Intercessor versus like a company veteran with a chainsword, like at least the Assault Intercessor is cheaper. This guy's 16 points. He's got a knife instead of a chainsword, so he doesn't get the AP1. He costs more. The only thing that he has outside of the ability to take the like kind of the grapnel hooks or whatever and stuff like that, which suck because you can't even charge with them, and these are melee models. You have to it's only a normal move, I believe. Um, the only thing they have is that nerve test debuff, which is not very good in this game. And this is the one model that I think you could never justify taking. Like there's always something better and cheaper. So yeah, sorry Reivers. Um, you can maybe give them points because they look cool, but I'm not going to do that. So yeah. Reivers, yeah, they're pissing on the grave, as Ryan said, of Reivers. They're done. They're completely gone. You could maybe justify them back when it was before Assault Intercessors existed, before AP1 Chainswords existed. Um, and now it's like even the 2 wounds don't matter because like that was a thing they had too over a lot of like veterans and stuff. But now everybody's got 2 wounds, so these guys are just garbage. They're actually the same cost as a veteran. I mean, let that sink in. Okay, next new guy we have Heavy Intercessors. These models are, I mean, people have talked them to death about how 17 points, toughness 5, 3 wounds. That's a ridiculous chassis. You could give it nothing, and it would be a ridiculous chassis. But it's got some pretty cool ranged weapons, and the gunners come in at around 23 to 24 points, depending on what what heavy bolter you want to take, what flavor. Um, and it's, I mean, the heavy bolter's 2 damage now. It's 3 shots. I mean, it's AP1. So these guys, while they don't have the mobility of a suppressor or like the concealed deployment ability of an eliminator, as a pure gunner, even with the 5-inch movement, I mean, 36-inch range on the heavy bolter more than makes up for that. The heavy bolter is ridiculous. The durability of this model is just ridiculous. That being said, I do think Astartes is a better melee team than a ranged team, so I don't think these guys are going to be as kind of broken as people think. The problem with them really is that they are so good at their niche, is that they make stuff like Eliminators and other ranged dedicated models sort of irrelevant. So I'm going to put them B tier right now. I mean, maybe they could go A tier, but I think, I mean, they don't have invulns or anything, so you can at least hypothetically, you can kill them. Just, I mean, maybe they're A tier just because of that chassis. Oh, I'm thinking about it now. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna put them A tier. They're not as good as Bladeguard vets for what they do, but they are extremely strong. Next up, we've got Infiltrators. Um, Infiltrators, I mean, they have the concealed deployment. They always have. They have bolt guns that auto wound on a 6. It's still just 0 AP. It's just a bolt gun. Now that Incursors get it too, and they have they have also a pretty similarly good bolt gun, and they've got the combat blades. I think Incursors are just better than Infiltrators. I think Infiltrators are D tier for me. I can't get into them. There's no customization. I mean, 2 wounds doesn't matter anymore because everybody's got 2 wounds. So yeah, I mean, these are strong. These are strong models. They really are. But in a faction where everything is strong, and you need to start looking at like efficiency and like what am I paying for, I don't think Infiltrators are actually that good. If you really want concealed deployment, you can just take an Incursor, and it's a slightly more flexible model. So yeah. Moving on, we got Scouts. So Scouts are the only 1 wound model the Marines get, and I think it's probably worth talking about them. Just because like Scouts, especially the Scout Sergeant, got a major buff with Brian Nexus. The Scout Sergeant can take like any weapons basically. Everything's open to him. and he's still really cheap. He's only like 11 points. So you give that guy like a grav gun or a combi grav, and he's like 13 points. Suddenly you have a cheap gunner, and he gets a chainsword. That's really, really good. What gets really crazy is that I know I've said that the best gunner option is Heavy Intercessor, and that is true. They are the best gunner that you can take for this team. Um, However, the most valuable, or I guess the most efficient gunner is the scout gunners, because before scouts could only take one heavy bolter. It was like one heavy weapon, one special weapon, or something. Um, or so they can only take one heavy bolter. I don't remember exactly what the wording was, but now post Prime Nexus, both your scout gunners can take heavy bolters, and they get the new strong heavy bolter. So you get that weapon on a 16-point model now. That's really good. In fact, it's so good that I would consider putting it above Heavy Intercessors, just because the Scout Sergeant is an amazing chassis. It's like the perfect leader. You can make him an amazing flex model. The value for these models is amazing. And once you get into Space Wolves, you know what? Just because of the Space Wolf Scouts, I think Scouts belong above Heavy Intercessors, just based on the fact that you're going to see Scouts in way more lists than Heavy Intercessors, I think. Once like the tournament meta starts to shake up, it's going to be the Scout show and the Veteran show. And anything else is going to be kind of a supplement. In fact, just because of that, you know what? I think Heavy Intercessors are a solid B tier. The more I look at it, you're never going to see that many on a list, in my opinion. I don't think anyway. And the Space Wolf Scouts, they can take special weapons for their gunners. So you can get, that's the only access that Marines have to like a cheap gunner. So you can get like a 13-point grav gun on two guys, whereas before Prion Access, like the cheap gunner was like a 15-point company vet with a grav gun. But that same company vet is now 18 points with the grav gun. So your cheap gunner options are out the window, but if you're playing with scout gunners, suddenly you have them back. Granted, the models they're one wound, they have a 4-up save instead of a 3-up save. They have worse leadership. They're gonna die easier. But with Death Denied and stuff, and like Battle Brothers for all these multi-win models, you can really protect these scouts really well if you know what you're doing. So I think scouts are going to end up being one of the most valuable models for Astartes players going forward. Okay, next up, this is I can't really tell because it's just becoming blue boys everywhere. This is an Intercessor. So I mean, Intercessors, it's a tough call because Intercessors are not the most flexible. They have a few options. I mean, I guess that's not fair. I would say Intercessors are at a glance less flexible, but they can take the bolt rifle, they can take the auto bolt rifle, and they're only 15-point chassis. And you can put an Auspex on them to really help some of your gunners out. And there's cool plays you can make with Intercessors, and they're really cheap for what they do, which is sit back most of the time with a cheap gun, put out bolter shots that have AP, which is a nice thing for 15 points. I'm a big fan of Intercessors, but what really puts it over the edge for me is the Intercessor Sergeant is a really good model. He could take a bullet rifle and a Power Fist, and that chassis is super valuable in Kill Team. That alone makes me think that the regular Intercessors are probably B tier. Probably worse than Heavy Intercessors. I mean, 2 points more, you get basically the same model for extra toughness and an extra wound. That's insane. And I mean, Intercessors don't have access to like heavy bolters or anything. So they're definitely worse than Heavy Intercessors in my eyes, but they still have a role to play in Astartes, I think. Let's move on to Techmarines. Techmarines used to be, okay, you want a slightly cheaper gunner on a Marine model. This is probably the way to do it. But here's the thing. They're still cheaper than veterans. And they can take like the special weapons and like the plasma and the combi weapons and stuff. But with scout gunners now being even cheaper and filling that role for them, Techmarines really, in my opinion, kind of fall out. They don't specialize in anything like some of the models here in C tier, and they kind of fall into like a Reaver problem, in my opinion, where they aren't more expensive, but they are just explicitly worse than a lot of things. Well, I guess they are more expensive than the Scout Gunners. especially the Spaceful Scout Gunners, just blow them out of the water. So I don't think I would. I mean, I don't think Techmarines are really going to have much of a place in the Marine meta, personally. There's always something better, like a veteran's always better, and they can't do any like concealed deployment stuff. They can't fly. They have no melee capability. They have worse leadership than a lot of these models. So I'm thinking D tier. That being said, they can still take plasma and stuff. So if you really want a plasma spam, I don't know why you would with Marines, but if you really want to, they're probably better, and they fill a better niche than Eliminators do. Or not Eliminators, sorry, Infiltrators. Whereas I feel like the Infiltrators, like I said, they're just kind of explicitly worse than Incursors now, in my opinion. And last but not least, we got the Terminator. So Terminators have been like the red-headed stepchild of Astartes for a long time, where they're just way too expensive for their points cost. However, they got a buff. They're still 25 points base, but they're 3 wounds now instead of 2 wounds. This is kind of important because, say, like a Storm Shield guy with like a Lightning Claw or something, like that model is like 31 points if it's a Terminator. And then you've got a 2-up save on the guy. So for those of you not aware of the new Storm Shield change, Storm Shields, not only do they give you a 4-up invuln, but they add 1 to your armor saves. So a guy like a Terminator, you hit a Terminator with a Storm Shield with AP 1, because he's +1 on that armor save, he still gets a 2-up save even against AP 1. So you need AP 3 just to get to the 4-up invuln. Anything less than that, he's getting a 2-up save or a 3-up save. And that's pretty crazy. Pair that with the fact that Terminators, I mean, you can kit them out in more ways than Bladeguard veterans, whereas Bladeguard veterans are really stuck into their one build, essentially. Maybe, I mean, you can switch up the pistol, but that's about it. That being said, the Bladeguard veterans are a couple points cheaper, same amount of wounds, and I mean they're going to have more attacks as well. So usually a Bladeguard vet is a better choice, and it's got 6-inch movement, whereas the Terminator has 5-inch movement. Granted, a Terminator can deep strike, so maybe that's worth consideration if you're playing an open board. I do think Terminator's got a big buff though. I don't know if they become like auto take in the meta necessarily. I mean they definitely aren't an auto take, but compared to what they were before, they're a lot better. And I think because of that, I'm going to put him in between, right here, snug between the heavy intercessor and his little brother, the regular intercessor. Yeah, okay, this is what we got. This is what I'm looking at. I'm pretty happy with this. You know, I mean, I want you guys to tell me your thoughts on this tier list. This is just how I personally see the Astartes meta shaking out as far as what models are going to be taken the most often. I think we're going to see these company vets and all the veterans are going to kill it. Now, the Bladeguard veteran is going to be a mainstay in a lot of melee lists. Scouts, you're going to see them all over the place. I bet you'll see a Scout Sergeant in like a lot of the best Astartes lists as a leader, at least, if not maybe like a cheap gunner. Yeah, I mean this is just how I see it shaken up. Rest in peace, Reivers. We hardly knew ye. Yeah, I mean I don't think there's anything else for me to talk about here, but this is it. Thank you guys for tuning in. And listening to me ramble on about the Astartes models and Kill Team. Follow us on our Discord. We have so many events going on all the time. We've got a growing community. I think we just hit over 600. Subscribe on YouTube if you aren't. Last I checked, Ryan said 67% of you are not subscribed of the viewers. That's too much. We gotta hit those numbers. We need more subscribers on the channel. We just hit 2,000. It's been an amazing ride over the last, I guess, like year and a half at this point. Last thing, if you are loving our content, follow us on Patreon. You'll get early access to all of our videos. You'll get exclusive access to my series, Inside Shane's Brain, where I just talk about my list building process and I show you guys some of the lists that I'm working on for tournaments. And you'll get access to every other podcast exclusively. So if that interests you, go check it out. All this stuff is going to be in the description. Thank you so much for listening, guys.